You're listening to Current Position, a weekly briefing from Expeditors mapping the shifts across trade compliance, regulatory changes, and global supply chains. Plus some market insights from our Senior Vice President of Global Air, Carl Francisco. I'm Chris Parker, and here's the latest from August 5th to August 11th. First, a note on a global disruption. Typhoon season is impacting major transportation hubs in Asia, with a 13th typhoon of the year hitting over the weekend. Typhoon Dolphin impacted China's eastern coast between Shanghai and Fujian province. The storm brought heavy rain and winds that caused port, vessel, flight, and trucking disruptions. Terminal operations were stalled at several ocean ports, and around 60% of flights in and out of PVG and Hongqiao airports were canceled. It is unclear how long it'll take ocean and airports to recover from the lost time. Now for global customs and trade. A filing from the U.S. Court of International Trade shows the U.S. has refunded about $100 billion of the $166 billion in IEEPA tariffs collected. The Supreme Court struck down the IEEPA reciprocal tariffs in February, but some critics say refunds are flowing back to corporations and not making their way to the end consumer. The Trump administration has since added new 10% duties under separate authority. Brazil recently announced plans to develop new trade agreements with China and South Korea. China and Brazil are exploring increased cooperation in areas such as artificial intelligence, critical mineral processing, and fertilizer trade. Brazil and South Korea, meanwhile, will initiate their talks through a working group tasked with identifying and addressing sensitive issues that have hindered past progress. On to the ocean market. Maersk and Hapag-Lloyd's Gemini cooperation took another step back toward Red Sea movement this week. Gemini's AE-19 or SE-4 service has been returned to its original transit via the Red Sea and Suez Canal rather than taking the lengthier passage around the Cape of Good Hope. Carriers began rerouting ships almost 3 years ago in response to attacks on commercial shipping. Gemini's carrier partners say they made the move after thoroughly vetting the security conditions. Rates on the Asia to U.S. East Coast trade lane keep rising just under $10,000 according to indices. The Freightos Baltic Index showed prices increase 1% to the East Coast to hit over $9,100 and a new high for 2026. Rates to the U.S. West Coast from Asia hit just shy of $7,000. The National Retail Federation even revised its outlook on demand for the next few months as consumers continued to buy despite inflation. Now for global air. Air demand from China to Europe fell for a sixth straight week, dragging down the global July market. World ACD data shows chargeable weight from China and Hong Kong to Europe dropped 5% and 3% week on week. Experts believe this may partially be due to new EU import rules that went into place July 1st. Average spot rates from Hong Kong to Europe slid 15% since late June and 29% from mainland China. Despite these drops, worldwide July tonnages rose 5% year on year, and capacity ticked up 1% as Gulf region belly space recovered. And finally, onto global ground. A magnitude 7.4 earthquake near San Jose del Palmar, Colombia, is impacting transportation through the area. Authorities have declared a national disaster as significant structural collapses have occurred in Pereira, Manzanales, Choco, and Cali. Major transportation disruptions are expected as many roads are fully or partially closed due to damage assessment and debris removal. Mexico plans to double truck capacity at the World Trade Bridge, North America's busiest cargo crossing. The project would include widening the span and building a parallel bridge between Nuevo Laredo and Laredo to create a total of 18 commercial cargo lanes. Construction will start later this year with the goal of cutting across times and logistics costs between Mexico and the U.S. The Laredo Gateway handled $36.33 billion in trade just in the month of May, which was up over 19% over the same time in 2025. Up next, Carl Francisco. Carl Francisco, welcome this week to Current Position. What has been on your mind this week?
More capacity is needed in the air market today. Mm-hmm. And that seems to be the case over the last 6 months or so.
Yeah, what's going on with the capacity here?
Well, I can tell you, the primary drivers in air cargo right now, and I think everyone knows this, is the surge in hyperscalers, AI. Anything to do with AI right now is extremely hot. You can't get enough of it right now. We continue to see a strong demand for capacity in the marketplace, but it's heavily concentrated in certain areas only in the world. For example, Taiwan seems to be the hottest spot in the world today on exports of semiconductors and also anything to do with hyperscalers. You can't get enough capacity in that market today. The growth is unbelievable coming out of Taiwan, not only to the US, but also to Europe as well. The second largest vertical in the air market is e-com. Now, e-com, we know, has really made it very difficult for a lot of shippers, traditional air freight shippers. With the surge of e-com going back about 2 years, there's been a lot of changes in e-com over the last year, with the U.S. administration restricting de minimis entries back in May of last year. We saw a huge drop in demand of e-com coming into the United States. But today, here we are, a year later, it's back. It's back. So the e-com companies out of China, Hong Kong, they've figured out a way to continue to utilize air capacity and ship products by air freight. So they're back, right? So they're consuming a lot of capacity in the Trans-Pacific trade right now.
And what has changed? I mean, de minimis has effectively leveled out, like those smaller parcels and such coming across. What has changed now? What is the strategy that's proven effective and able to maintain e-commerce channels across from China to the U.S.?
Well, the reason why it works so well for the e-com companies out of China, Hong Kong, is they want speed. Speed is critical. They don't hold a lot of inventory in the U.S., and their model is B2C. So it goes from factory, shipper, directly to the consumer in the U.S., right? So they're not holding a lot of inventory in the U.S. So that's extremely critical. So they found a way to continue to utilize their freight by working around, what the government is basically requiring of them to do. So they're, in essence, they're a traditional shipper now. They're filing entries with U.S. Customs. They're paying duties on the merchandise that's coming in, and they're really good at it. So they know how to do it extremely well, and they're being very compliant in doing so, which is the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And from what you know and have heard from others, like, has the experience changed for the sea, right? People ordering online, are they supposed to be experiencing slightly slower turnaround for receiving their product, or has that remained unchanged?
When de minimis went away, I think they were affected, the customers, a lot, because, things sort of just stopped, right? It took a lot for the e-coms to get back to where they used to be. This industry won't change as consumers continue to purchase online. That's just a way of buying retail today, and they'll continue to do so. So we don't see that business going away. What's changed more recently in the e-com world is shipping from China, Hong Kong to Europe. Right. So the rules change in Europe in July of this year that places a tariff on items going into the EU right now. Because of that, we believe that the buyer behavior changed a lot. It added additional costs, and the volumes dropped like it did in the US. So much so that, we believe that the airlines now, they're considering shifting capacity from that trade into other hot trades in the world because the demand isn't there like it used to be. But the e-com companies are pretty quick to figure things out, and they believe that the volume will come back. It's just going to take some time for it to get back to where it used to be. But no doubt about it, it's not going to go away. It's here to stay.
So with that demand will mean a greater need for capacity, I imagine. But capacity is already strained because there's this industry, semiconductors and hyperscalers, is already taking up a large chunk of that. You said earlier that there's a large concentration of that capacity has gone towards that industry. Do you feel like this is going to be a permanent thing, a temporary thing, or will the air market have to permanently adjust to the needs of the semiconductor industry to account for the other growing demand from consumers?
Sure. Yeah, I get a lot of calls from customers, and they're all wondering, when will rates get back to normal, right? And we all know that rates are elevated, not only because of the war, but primarily because of demand. Demand is extremely strong in the world today on air freight. I think the numbers that I saw, the growth in demand in Q2 was close to 4 to 5% growth, which is really strong. And that's year over year growth, right? And then when you think about capacity increase into the market, only 1% entered the market in terms of additional capacity. So you can see, the supply and demand imbalance there. So in order for things to get back to normal in terms of rate, a couple of things needs to happen. The first thing that needs to happen is the war. The war needs to end. Right, so we can get fuel back to where it used to be pre-war. Okay, that's still highly elevated, not as much as it used to be in April, but it's still not where it needs to be, where it was back in March. The second thing would be demand. What's going to happen with the surge with AI and semiconductors? And we're not seeing the end of that right now. We don't think the end is in sight right now. So as companies continue to scale, that hunger to move this product by air freight is extremely strong right now, and we don't see that slowing down. So what it's doing is forcing a lot of the carriers to reposition aircraft to try and chase that volume, and that's heavily concentrated in key markets again. You're talking about Taiwan, talking about Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, and then also India to some degree. Okay. So we're not really sure when that's going to slow down, but that's creating a lot of problems in the airspace today.
And what industries or verticals would you say are losing out as a result of this concentration in those regions because of that need from the semiconductor industry? Who's losing out right now?
Well, I think, the industrial electronics industries is sort of losing out on capacity right now, or they're experiencing more than higher prices in the marketplace. They're not used to paying those prices. That's number one. And then your traditional retail companies, your big box retailers also. Now, they don't plan to ship a lot of air freight, but they do ship a lot of air freight on occasion. So they're also seeing elevated rates that they're not used to seeing. And it's all caused by, again, demand in the semiconductor and AI industry, as well as the war, right? The other thing about the war, not only will fuel come down when the war is over, but you will also see capacity back to normal. When you think about the world's largest carriers being, in the Middle East, they were affected heavily by the war. So we need to see the capacity re-enter the market at 100%. And that's really important too.
And what are your thoughts around, Section 301 duties about to hit, 60 some countries or so? How's that going to go hand in hand with the volatility that we're seeing now?
On the air side, the air customers, I think they're aware of how to handle the 301 duties, and they plan for it already. So I don't think we'll see much disruption when it comes to that on airspace. We've gone through it long enough, and I think shippers are ready to deal with that, where they've already shipped a lot of the products into the country, either by ocean freight or, they plan for it. So we don't see a big disruption when it comes to that.
Thank you so much, Carl. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for the time, Chris.
You are now at our current position. Links to everything we covered today, plus some extra articles of interest, are in the show notes. And while you're there, check out the events and webinars we flagged for the weeks ahead. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.